So, quick summary. Aidan, an incredible student, although he might sound like he is 45 with his experience. He started the Canada Files, one of my favorite places to get media because there are so few places to get that in Canada now. And I think that gives the quick introduction. I'd be very excited and interested here from Aidan a little bit about himself, and then we'll jump into some rapid fire questions about Canada, the state of Canadian media, and what, practically speaking, we can do to make it better and maybe save the world. So, Aidan, to you.
All right, so thank you very much. So, a little about me. So, actually, oh man, it's been a bit of a funny ride over time. So obviously, I'm the editor in chief of the Can Files. So it's a socialist, anti-imperialist news site founded in November 2019. I've written about Canadian imperialism, federal politics, left-wing resistance to colonialism around the world. For the Can Files mainly, a bit for Canadian Dimension, Palestine Chronicle, the Orinoco Tribune, and Dissident Voice. So I'm actually a second-year Bachelor of Journalism student at Ryerson University, and I was the head of communications and community engagement for Etobicoke North candidate for the NDP, Naima Farah, back in the 2019 election. So yeah, it's definitely been a lot more of a ride than I expected, but you know what? I'm very grateful to actually be here chatting with you and with all these people at honestly a great left-wing forum.
Yeah, awesome. I think one of the things that's exciting to me is that the world is falling apart. It's on fire. Everything's terrible right now. A lot of like the students are like, "Yo, I just gotta survive. Never mind, start their own media organization." What is that that compelled you to do such a thing?
Uh, uh, so a funny one. So I do the typical kind of um, route, and I just didn't find like a fit there. So I ended up just starting my own paper because there was a certain thing like with the eye opener where I was writing about a climate change conference, and I was basically told that I had to change some wording around climate change because some people didn't believe in that, and I was being biased. And that kind of set me off a little bit. I was a little worried with there. And then basically I tried writing again. I had spoken in favor of the student strike. Basically that was happening last October. That was organized by Fight Back. And so I got blocked from covering that basically because I had spoken out in favor of that. And so that was my point of where I was like, okay, I need a new space to go. And I feel like there felt like there's a lot of other people that are frustrated in a similar manner, and so that was the reason to join Files. It was a focus like it is now at the start. It was kind of something where I more found my niche over time, really. So basically, it kind of started off as more like activist, just left perspective on news, little Ryerson focus, and world focus, and it was the more I covered because you see, I had no idea about Canadian Dimension or basically like Read Passage or some of these other sites basically until like a couple months after I started the Canada Files. So I didn't really see that space at all in media there. And I mean, in hindsight, I think even if I had have seen those spaces, I'm kind of glad I went along and did my own thing because I don't think there really is a site like the Canada Files. Yeah, it's definitely very unique perspective. And yeah, no, it's been a funny road, but I'm very glad that I ended up getting to where I did.
Yeah, for sure. Likewise, I'm very happy to see you there. I like to keep things like practical, like what we can practically do to make the world a better place. What specifically is your vision with the Canada Files, and maybe more broadly speaking, like maybe just the state of Canadian media? What should we, just like the readers and the viewers, kind of be doing to maybe help amplify, help share, be more aware? Is there anything that you would recommend to someone in that space as an action we should be taking?
Well, if there's one thing I would love to see, really, I would love to see the leftist publications come together and build a kind of network that Harbinger is trying to do with the podcast network. That's the biggest thing to me. I've gotten the sense that there's generally a lot of left media seems to kind of have the mindset of we have our own corner and that's going to be it. And I mean, I'd obviously love to be proved wrong, but that's the sense I've always gotten. And I think basically the reason why we get beat by right wing media a lot of the times is because they're relentlessly sharing their work, they're relentlessly sharing the information, they're relentlessly sharing their videos, they're gaming these algorithms, and they're really starting to build viewer support together. Because I get that people want to have like a financially secure job that can get them basically something they're proud of, but if there wants to be really like a sustainable left wing news kind of where people can actually make a living based off of that, it's actually going to be cooperation, and it's going to be building like a unified front among the left that's going to actually get us there. I don't think the current state of left media in kind of our isolation from each other essentially is really going to do much to get us there, because I've made efforts and tried to reach out to some other left media, and Reed Passage was the only one who's even remotely responsive, and that just kind of fell out for, I don't really know why it fell out, but that discussion just randomly stopped out of nowhere. So it's the cooperative element of the left media is probably its number one failure, I think, and that's the experience I've gotten. Uh, Also, just because sometimes as an editor, basically you want to just chat with fellow editors, or you want to chat with fellow people within the industry, and I just never really get the sense that that opportunity is really there that much. I just think there needs to be a lot of a real focus and a real hard drive to cooperation, for cooperation. Like the one I want to give kudos again yet to the Harbinger Podcast Network. I think that's the kind of mentality that needs to go on if we want to win the battle of ideas, as Rave Dubin would put it.
No, that's beautiful. And that seems like it's a common sentiment coming up, is we need to do just better communicating with each other, connecting with each other. I know Andre Goulet will be kind of making a grand finale on Sunday to talk about the Harbinger Network. And every experience I've had with him, and I think everybody in that network, has been absolutely incredible. And I think I can kind of echo the sentiment that there is a positive sweetie pie socialist group out there looking to build a coalition of people to really meaningfully change the world. And there's also seems to be some that have kind of built their hill and are happy to live upon it without supporting students, people coming up. They almost live in their tower of, I guess, knowledge and connections, which is kind of odd to see on the left. Is there anything you think, other than organizing with others, you would like to see be done to maybe create that more collaborative environment? I'm thinking specifically in terms of maybe groups or institutions you've seen outside of Canada that have helped build that momentum. And no worries if that's too hard to answer.
Well, I mean, I've seen the Gravel Institute as kind of a really fascinating one that brings together some creators in the United States, like as one to challenge PragerU. I would like to see something like that. I mean, there's obviously something like the Broadbent Institute, but I see that as kind of a center-left policy think tank, really. So I don't think that's really up to the task. In general, I don't think the NDP is really up to the task of bringing the left to victory. And so, yeah, no, I think we could really use like a socialist kind of Gravel Institute kind of strategy. I think basically, really, we need to. I've always had a big focus on institution building, basically from day one of my. Because I came into journalism from an activism sphere. Basically, I was a student activist. I was involved even before I started this a bit with the Ryerson NDP. So I don't come from the typical journalism background. So I think basically institution building for me is absolutely crucial. Like even back in the day with SAPEC, so Students Against Public Education Cuts, I was in discussions to try to create a high school students union. And so institution building has always been important to me. And I think that needs to happen. I think it's been a concerning lack of institution building that's gotten us to the problems that we have today. Because if you try to fight these battles alone, well, you're not going to win anything, really.
Yeah, great point. Like one of the things too is when people are trying to build their network and try to build a coalition of support, and not even just in media, but if you're trying to start, going back to James's talk, let's say you're trying to start like a transit riders union, you need the media to kind of be there to support you to broadcast your message. Is there any tips or tricks you'd have for people trying to start their own movements and getting noticed either by Canada Files or just the media in general?
Yet again, another good question. I would say the major thing is you really got to be clear about your values. You got to be clear about who you are. I think part of the reason why the Canada Files has actually had success is because we've made it very clear that we are socialist, and basically that's the key faction of it. It's really being open about who you are, being clear about your purpose, and helping people to understand why you're unique, why you should be looking at basically supporting them or covering them specifically. That you're not this run-of-the-mill group that'll just fade out in a little while. And I mean, obviously, the Canada Files we're trying to cover like a lot of left-wing activism, foreign policy, and these key focuses. But yeah, no, just really my major number one tip is don't be afraid to promote yourself. That's how really like I got Canada Files to grow, was basically kind of having that shameless nature of just being willing to put yourself out there and being willing to put the content out there. And I think basically, yeah, really, you tend to always be your best promoter. So basically, people aren't. I found, at least with Canada Files, was really it's never been that like many groups or many of these things have really like given us the big boosts or anything like that. It's really just been just pushing ourselves out there, and really making sure people know who we are. And I think that's something that can be taken in by some of these activist groups and some of these smaller media groups as well.
Awesome. And so just to kind of like try to break it down even smaller. So one of the things that I know a lot of people appreciate that I've spoken to about you is that when you drop a story, you'll at a bunch of people. And you'll like at like Lefty Mind, you'll have a lot of people to kind of they're related to the story, but also just kind of allies in general. I think that's one tactic I've seen that's been pretty cool. Is there any specific tactics that you can recommend that kind of help boost the message, boost the signal?
Well, when I used to start, I actually used Facebook groups a lot. Basically, that was kind of a really important one, and that's been something where it's no longer really necessary for me to do. Basically, I've built up enough of a network. But that's what I mean when I'm talking about being a bit shameless, is you have to use every single resource that's available to you. And even if some people in the group aren't going to like you, basically you might win over some people. And that's the key, is when you really start from nothing, you have to use everything you have. And so sometimes you might feel like, is this a little much? But you have to have kind of that shameless mentality. Because if you're pushing for the right things, you got to be willing to really fight for it. So that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I know. Like we run Canada Left, the subreddit, and
Oh yeah, you guys were actually important as well. The Reddits as well. So I appreciate you guys.
oh yeah, no worries. I was just bringing that up because we always pin your stuff to try to like make sure people see your content because it is so gold, and it's just fun to see the reaction to the stuff that you put out there. Either sometimes people go crazy and just you see in the comments, and then sometimes people just like shower with nothing but love. I think
Oh
there's
yeah.
been a few stories that have gone viral that you've dropped, specifically when it comes to like Venezuela. It's really fun to see your content in general. I think like one of the things I'm wondering is like we see people they see a Venezuela story and they're like, okay, we know that this is basically CIA bullshit. When they see your story and like, okay, this makes sense. This is like a good interpretation of it, countering the corporate narrative. But then if you drop a story on China, that's where people kind of push back a little bit. Like for you, how do you
Oh
weigh that?
man. Oh man, people lose their minds when you bring up China. Jeez, it's there's this real like the left. There's a real left anti-communism. There's a real left anti-communist sentiment, I think, among the Canadian left, and I think that's really you have to kind of banish that sentiment before the Canadian left ever really wins. I mean, Michael Parenti talked about American left anti-communism, and he brought up a lot of really good points there. I absolutely recommend that people read some of his books, but there really is like this penchant for China bashing. And I think China's not perfect by any means. And there's definitely some things that I don't have exact agreements with. Like I would still like to see them ramp up, basically having workers have more control of the means of production where they are. But at the same time, I'm also very careful to try to avoid having the Western chauvinist attitude that's very typical of the Western left. And I think that's one of the most ones that kind of triggers the most anger is this idea that a lot of the Canadian left doesn't grasp that a lot of our mainstream media is literally pushing imperialist propaganda every single day. They can grasp that American media is propaganda, but for some reason, when it comes to Canadian media and Canadian content, people's minds just go into we must conform, we must accept. And it's just frustrating because when I'll do pieces on that, or I mean, I even wrote one up basically about the security law, and I actually compared it to between Hong Kong security law and Canadian security law, and showed that basically they're extremely similar. And actually, there is so much examples and so much finite proof of financial support for the Hong Kong support movement coming from the U.S., the NED, basically the CIA connected group, the government there. And so I prove it with evidence, and people don't look through the evidence. They just yell at me. Basically, they yell at the site, basically, and they just attack, attack, attack. And even I saw in the Green Party debate, basically, Haddad call for sanctions. I saw Lascaris say we had to clean up our own backyard in terms of like decolonization, so then we could go off China. And I did find that especially disturbing because we need to decolonize Canada and we need land to do full land back to Indigenous nations. But why the hell is that some sort of, once we get that done, then we can go for China? And so it's just, I feel like it speaks to, there's this real problem among the Canadian left, I think, and I mentioned anti-communism, but that they struggle to kind of objectively handle these things. It's just, there's an automatic like trigger in the brain when people talk about China. It's just that China bad, and it's just really an uncritical acceptance of media narratives that I find to be very disappointing and very disturbing at times, because I think basically there's a real push towards a Cold War with China by the U.S. I think Canada is participating in that. And yet again, I'm going to make it clear here, I'm not saying what China's done perfect, basically in any means, shape, or form. But there is a real push for a Cold War or even a hot war, like a direct war there. And the Canadian left seems to think it can take this kind of third way style response where it can just be neutral. But if you're neutral and you're not like defending China from kind of this imperialist push from the United States and from a lot of the West, there's a Howard Zinn quote, I believe it was, where it's like you can't be neutral on a moving train. And I feel like a lot of the left is either bashing China or trying to be neutral there in some sort of third way kind of diluted idea. So yeah, I think that's going to trigger some conversations and ideas there. But yeah, I don't certainly hold opinions that are the majority on the Canadian left.
That's a beautiful quote, just to pull from somewhere. Did you have that written down? You have to tell us.
No.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful.
No, I really didn't actually.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it brings up an important point of being critical and being able to read the media with a critical eye. Is there any like tips or tricks to being able to consume media? Let's say like I'm just like, this is the first time I've seen this chat and the first time I've seen interaction with you, and I'm like, okay, maybe the media is pushing a corporate or imperialist narrative. What am I looking for to know that I'm being lied to?
It's obviously not an easy one, basically, because you have like the entire media ecosystem is basically all filled with tons of propaganda, basically. But the number one things you're gonna really want to keep an eye on is essentially you want to look at who's owning basically the news site. Basically, secondly, you're gonna want to look at their evidence. Where are they using evidence from? Who are they talking to? Are those people reliable? And basically, it's the kind of question I'm not even sure if I can fully answer, because giving the answer on the definitive how to find reliable media, I don't think is a one that is developed easily. But really, I think also basically has to be open about their perspective and clear about where they stand or their bias, quote unquote. I think it's very much if you have an paper that focuses on neutrality or objectivity, that is an immediately an extremely red flag. Basically, because that's just a way to really perpetuate the status quo without saying you are. Because if you look at it, like for example, a lot of the institutions or news institutions that claim to be unbiased, let's just throw out CTV for example. Basically, by supporting the capitalist system and supporting the current means of production and supporting the decisions of a capitalist government, they're showing bias and acting in favor of the capital system. But for some reason, in the neutrality context, basically you can be all pro-capitalism all you want, and you're neutral. And so I think that's why I think it's really a broken concept, because I think you want to trust a news site that bases its work on facts, evidence, and is really critical of the sources that it uses. Um, yeah, so I hope that was helpful.
Hmm.
But I don't know if I can give a full answer on that, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. That I think that was perfect. It's always it's people are going to tell you they're objective. Don't believe them. It's tough. So you have to disclose bias. I think one of the things I'm thinking while I'm listening to this is just the talk with Mumilak, and then another talk that we have coming up. Not just so when you're writing a story, you're looking to be as objective as possible. You're looking to cite your sources and whatnot. What are some of like the tools that a journalist uses in their tool belt that maybe some of like us random regular people can use to have better conversations with our neighbors without inflaming it into a black versus white issue?
Uh, I'd say in terms of the way you do research, I don't know if I would say it's like a crazy exceptional kind of way. I mean, a lot of the times it's just trying to search up for sources and basically slowly build. Basically, I don't think a lot of journalists do it in an incredibly special, secretive way. I mean, obviously, if you're gonna have like certain special voices in the story, or like for example, then obviously you're gonna want to chat with them and try to set that up, basically, and integrate that into the article. But um, the stuff that journalists do in terms of research and some of these things, they really aren't actually impossible for a normal person just to pop out of the blue and start doing. Um, I mean, for example, with me, like starting the Canada Files, I mean, I started this like 2 months into journalism, so I really found that I find that like, and this might piss off some people in like the journalism circles, but I find that basically if you just go about it on your own and you start researching and you start figuring these things out, you can figure out a lot of these things on your own. You don't actually need the kind of institutions and some of these things that people think you have to like get to be someone who's reporting and investigating on the truth. Yeah, no, I just don't think really basically that. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, because I'm a little dense. So let's say I'm trying to convince my wife of the struggles in Wet to Wet and how important and serious that is. From like A to B, can you walk me through how I bring her to the light side?
Okay, so the number one thing is you're gonna want to do some research in advance, basically, to kind of get yourself an idea of essentially kind of the think of it like having some talking points. Immediately having talking points is key. Like thinking about talking points in the case of rebuttal. I know I'm phrasing it in more of a debate style,
That's
but
fine.
yeah, it's really important to just have the facts on your side. That's the number one thing, because what the number one thing that the status quo has, the number one advantage really is that it doesn't need any facts on its side. Its existence alone is considered proof of its truth. And so, yeah, that's once you've got like the facts on your side. Basically, it's yeah, you want to think about how you say it. But to a certain degree, it's about basically not having like an arrogant tone. It's being careful how you talk to people. It's about talking to respect. It's being willing to educate them if need be. Basically, take them through some of the simple stuff. Stuff that seems simple, basically stuff that seems easy. Just be patient. Take them through it. It'll take time, but eventually there's a decent chance they will get it.
Awesome. And is there in general a best widely recognized neutral source? For example, like CBC. It's somewhere that you usually go
No,
first to look. Do you just Google? Like, where's your first
no.
step?
Um,
No to
it,
CBC.
it really depends. I'll just basically be searching for a variety of sources like on an issue. Basically, this is the thing that's funny. Basically, I don't really think there is like a central place to get information or a central source. Like I don't see any neutral, objective kind of places. You can have places that have more expertise in specific areas and specific subjects. And so if you're talking about the subject that applies to a specific kind of paper or a specific kind of outlet, then you might go to that kind of outlet to look for that. But there isn't like one place to go. There isn't one place to say it's really about critical thinking. It's really about critical thinking, always, and how you're looking at the sources and you're looking at the information that's out there. Because I got to be honest, I really don't think that real critical thinking is actually taught in education and schooling. So it's a lot of like kind of reframing how you think about critical thinking. Because like even I experienced this going through high school, obviously recently. I think basically the critical thinking they teach you is critical thinking to do well within a job setting, to do well within a capitalist job setting. It's not actually one that's set up to make you think critically about the world you live in. It's the society you live in, the economic system you live in, basically. And so I'd say really, it's training yourself to think critically, to not automatically trust the kind of mainstream sources. But also part of it is I can't definitively tell people how to think critically. It's kind of about developing that aspect of yourself. It took me time. Basically, like there's some stuff where early on I got published where I'm kind of like, ah, damn it, I actually just didn't think critically enough about that, and like, so basically it takes time. But yet again, there is no like you can't just skip from 1 to 100. And so it's really about like how you're thinking about it, and a lot of it is mindset and just really always being willing to be proven wrong. I think is the biggest thing. Is once you do that, you're able to basically become a lot more effective in what you do. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
So I'm hearing so far that your pitch to save the world is we need a more united left media. We need to think critically. Is there something I'm missing in the conversation you think we really need to be prioritizing?
I think I specifically mentioned in terms of like a literal network of left publishers. And I want to be specific on that. I think there needs to be basically a network of left-wing and socialist publishers. That's going to be the biggest thing that I think there needs to be really strong collaboration. And I think eventually the left needs to kind of have some of them basically amalgamate together to create like a massive left-wing kind of outlet that can compete from country to country, I mean, from coast to coast, with the CBC or with Global News, which obviously dropped a hit job on Lascaris recently. And so, like, that's what I mean, basically, when I say there needs to be a combined left media effort there, because there's so much propaganda going out here right now. And by going on this alone, it's just not working.
Mm-hmm. So for the people watching now and the people watching the recorded, what is the step to help push that network? Are we adding people? Is there a petition? What's the practical to making this happen? Because it sounds like maybe it's initially like emails, contacts from the people who are already in these institutions, but for the public who wants to see this come to fruition, what are we doing to help make it happen?
So that's the part where, I mean, you can obviously put like public pressure on, you can chat with some of them. But I also can't offer a definitive answer there, because a lot of it I suppose it's going to be mainly like trying to convince these voices and these like people who are leading kind of these publications to kind of unite and to really collaborate and work together. Because yeah, you can start petitions, you could do a lot of things. But at the end of the day, the people that do have power in the decision making are the people that are leading these institutions. So I think a lot of it would just be trying to convince these people to collaborate and work. I've tried to do that myself, haven't didn't really get any luck there. So I mean, if there's like a really outspoken like pouring of public desire for this among the Canadian left, you might see some movement then. But um, there isn't really a catch-all answer. There's a lot of things you can do, but you have to convince the people at the very top, I guess. So.
Okay. So we will get to your final thoughts shortly. Before doing so, would you like to give us your final thoughts and overview of the Canada Files? I think it's a fairly exciting organization, but I'd like to hear from you. What's like the inside scoop? What's exciting? What's going on?
Geez. So, just in case people didn't hear, or maybe they're jumping in late. So, the Canada Files is a socialist news organization. We seek to focus on Canadian imperialism, left-wing activism, and key world issues. So, we're talking about the impact of Canada's foreign policy on the world, and also we're trying to cover Indigenous nations. And so, in terms of the inside and how it works, I mean, it's not like I feel like a lot of the reason why it's gotten to where it has just been application and consistent work. Because I think there's only so much you can do within an organization. Basically, it's just trying to connect people, work together, keep like a harmony in terms of the parts and the people that make up the Canada Files. But also, part of it is that eventually it's building up the financial resources to really make this a long-term feasible thing. Because obviously we live in a capitalist society, and the hard truth is you don't have cash. Geez, you serve and die. Like, that's the truth of the system. And so we're trying to build up that financial capacity so people can stay on long-term. So that's the major thing. And we do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/the Canada Files. If you can't donate there, just please do go support our social media platforms as well. But yeah, no, we've in terms of Canadian dollars, we've recently hit over $100 on the Patreon, which is solid. We're starting to grow that. But it really is that we need the finances to build this and to keep going forward. Because I think everyone in the Canada Files, we've put in a ton of work to do this, but it really is like as we get closer to a year, it's trying to plan long term, and it's mainly trying to retain people for the long term. Basically, it's like I need to make sure I can stick around there. Basically, that the writers, most importantly, basically can stick around there, and it's something that's going to take a while. But yeah, that's the major thing there really, is that basically the left media to build is tough because a lot of the times basically on the left is where basically there isn't just as much financial resources among people. The right wing or billionaires will just give money wanton to well, as much as they want really to basically these media orgs on the right to grow, but really anything that can be given helps, and it's just about really building left media for the long term and about building our capacity to keep covering foreign policy and to keep expanding and to keep challenging. So I will say on terms of stuff I'm looking forward to, there is kind of a special series or something that hopefully will be coming out like end of the month latest, looking more into Canada's past and some of these things. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I obviously want to keep it under wraps. But yeah, no, that's probably the main thing to look forward to. And in terms of something I have forgotten to mention so far, we started a podcast. The Canadian Foreign Policy Files is the name of the podcast, with myself, Yvonne Glaire, and Arnold August as co-hosts. So basically, we focus on themes that are very similar to the Canada Files core mojo. Basically, foreign policy, Canadian imperialism. Those are really the core focuses of it. We've had 2 episodes. We're going to do a special episode actually on Canada-China relations and on China more in general. So stuff like that, that's in the works to try to do that. And I think really just building a bigger consciousness among the Canadian left in terms of foreign policy, I think is really, really important. And I think that work is just going to continue on. And if people can support it, that is honestly terrific.
Amazing. Yeah. I think, so listening to you talk, I'm really excited by this and these ideas and what you're doing. I do wonder. So just kind of going back to Mumilak's talk, one of the things she raises as an issue is Canadians aren't really aware of our history, and as it's heavily propagandized, and the RCMP are great. So there's a bunch of things that we aren't aware of that maybe we should be. And I think foreign policy is a clear area that I think you've helped move the dial. Are you finding that foreign policy and history just aren't ad drivers for the Canadian media? Like, why do you think it is we don't talk about these things?
I don't. That's geez. Um, I guess the way to put it is, I think basically even like left media and such is kind of still caught up in propaganda. A lot of propaganda around foreign policy. I think there's some encouraging signs. I mean, obviously, at least there's a grasp on Venezuela and Cuba and some of these places, basically in Bolivia, that at least they understand imperialism there. But um, there's not a great understanding of imperialism, really, I think, beyond Latin America. And really, in general, I mean, it's even within the Canada files, there's still stuff I'm figuring out and finding out every day, basically, and contributors are finding out every day that we're just like, what the hell? We didn't even know that. And that's the thing is Canadian foreign policy is so underexplored that I could probably just go the next 3-4 years of just straight up finding stuff, basically, because it's really like, and part of the reason why I think coming into that space has been so successful is really because it was entirely a wasteland. There wasn't consistent coverage at all. And so it just really was a matter of walking in and basically being like, where the hell is everyone else? It's like, oh, okay. So yeah, I've actually kind of even like published an op-ed kind of criticizing left media recently. I mean, we all know about the Julian Assange show trial. Some of the Canadian leftists had a dumpster fire coverage of that. I mean, there's so much smears and false allegations against Julian Assange, who's really being prosecuted for the crime of doing journalism. They're trying to extradite him to the U.S. But like Rabble and some of the Canadian left media are like pushing these bullcrap narratives against them for so long, and I think like in one of these op-eds called them out. And I think like unless things change, I might be calling out some of them a bit more, and like that's the thing where maybe that might make coalition building a bit hard. But the truth is, I think there has to be like a reckoning along the Canadian left that not only basically on a bigger deal that basically relying on like a center left kind of NDP, or even thinking about whether we can rely on the Greens, even if Haddad or Lascaris wins. We need to think really beyond our current ideas, and we need to kind of kill off the Canadian left anti-communism. We need to really critically build these institutions, and we need to accept, I think, the biggest thing is really that basically that the fact is the way we did things in the past might have been totally wrong, and that there was really that we failed in the past, and I think that's the biggest problem among the Canadian left is kind of this attaching themselves still to the past that basically that just didn't work. It didn't succeed in the end of the day. And it never was really going to succeed. There's ill-fated strategies. I think the Canadian left really needs to embrace institution building for the future. It also needs to firmly embrace socialism, in my opinion. We have basically a lot of the Canadian left that is still basically social democrat or democratic socialist. And the problem is that they call themselves socialists, and I think that does do a bit of harm to the kind of the social brand, because like at a very core, basically to be a socialist means you want to take the means of production back to the workers. And I have not seen any really kind of left organization or left political party, well, not left organizations, there are some, but in terms of the left political parties and the major institutions, there is really no calls for that. It's managing capital at its very core. And so I think there needs to be a lot of change, and there needs to be a willingness to cast aside the vast majority of what has been done for the past 40, 50 years. I just don't think it's applicable, and I think you need to change fast. We're in a climate emergency. We're at a time where fascism is growing in its strength, and we have basically a main party begging the rich for 1 or 2% of their taxes. Like that's the state of the fucking left we're in. Like
Yeah.
we need to move the hell on, and we need to move the hell on fast. So,
That was inspiring. I don't know if you want that to be your final word. We got 3 minutes left if you do have final words to share with us.
well, I guess the major thing would just be, obviously, in terms of the Canada Files,
Mm.
we very much appreciate financial support there. Definitely go check out our social channels. We're definitely posting a fair bit. I mean, feel free to also follow my personal, basically Twitter there. I got Facebook as well, Instagram, all that
And
jazz.
sorry, just to confirm, we
Um,
have your Twitter handle up right now. What are we
yeah,
specifically looking for to find your Patreon, to find your website and whatnot?
yeah, sure. It's basically patreon.com/the Canada Files,
Okay,
and there's no spaces.
awesome.
So yeah, that's where it is specifically. But I guess the major thing to people, think media, think carefully about propaganda, and really embrace critical thinking and judgments. Because that's been the biggest thing for me of my shift to the left on foreign policy and some of these things where basically I was like a social democrat to start like a year ago. And I basically switched extremely rapidly, basically because the more I looked at the evidence and the more I looked at things behind it, I just came to the conclusion that everything I thought was wrong. And I think basically if people basically are willing to embrace that, I think you can really break free of the kind of social democrat and kind of the mindset that's really taking the Canadian left. And I think once we do that, we can kind of break free from the past and we can try to build a genuine socialist left, which to me is the only way that the Canadian left will ever win.
Exciting stuff. Sign me up. That sounds really good. Aidan, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Yeah, it has been an honor, sir.
All right. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thanks.
Honestly, this has been a great experience.
Excellent. Good.